For today's presentation, I wanted to get into layers and legends and the different ways that we can utilize those to kind of optimize our workflows in Bluebeam Revu. Moving on, for today's agenda, so like I said, I wanted to cover some layers and legends. Now, I'm going to talk about how we can, of course, tie those two together, but I also want to talk about the individual benefits of utilizing something like layers within your PDF process, whether you're doing design review, you're doing takeoffs, just space planning, or what have you. We're going to be able to utilize these layers, and then, of course, the legends to kind of pull that information that's in our PDFs and give us that symbology of it, right? So a little bit about us. For those of you who are new to the Cold Brew Revu series, again, my name is David Campbell, and I am with Topcon Solution Store. And Topcon Solution Store is the retail division to Topcon Positioning Systems. And really, that just means that we are we're a complete kind of solutions provider in the sense of we sell measuring and control like hardware systems. We have a complete office software solution through our partnerships with Autodesk and Bluebeam, but we also sell the field equipment, pencils, measuring tapes, what have you. We have field troubleshooting, local service and repair, and as I was saying there, the widest range of everyday field supplies and accessories. So we are pretty broad-based. Now, speaking of broad-based, we are also located in 13 we have 13 brick and mortar locations. We're located in 20 states, including Washington, D.C. And as of right now, we have 180 employees. So we are kind of growing. Again, my name is David Campbell. I'm an application specialist with the Topcon Solution Store. Let's go ahead and get right into review. So for starting out, one big thing that I wanted to talk about, and I'll start with kind of getting into the layers here. Let me move this down. One thing I wanted to talk about getting into this is that layers, of course, here on your panels, and if you're not seeing it, you can always right-click, go to show, and find your layers. Now, you'll notice that I have a few different layers already kind of pre-populated, but I wanted to show you guys something a little bit kind of different as well. First, for anyone who doesn't know what this is the tool chest, right? For our brand new users, this is where a lot of our commonly used tools can be stored, and then we can reference them for use kind of over and over again later. Now, the nice thing about some of these tools, you'll notice if I hover over some of these, they actually have an embedded layer within them, okay? So if I open up, I'm just gonna say File, Open, I'm gonna grab my second floor reference plan. So notice this one doesn't really have any layers on it other than the picture here. Now, if I come over and I grab one of my comments, let's say this sequence tool here, and I place my sequence tool, notice it automatically places that layer in my drawing, okay? So kind of going back to the whole smart tools conversation, I know I covered some of this on a previous webcast, but if you store these tools with this intelligence, with this information in it in terms of the subject or in this case a layer, what have you, you're going to be able to essentially retain that and keep using that moving forward. So again, we know that this is a hollow metal door. This is going to be number 3 out of 7 or 37. Well, it's 3070, so it's hollow metal 3070. And then again, we can control the visibility of this element with something like our layer. Now, these layers, right? Let me get back into construction set B here. As I'm placing my comments on this document, let's say I'm going to have an architectural comment here and this telecom room. We're going to name that to teleconference, right? Okay, so just an easy note. Okay, now if I place the contractor, same thing. You're going to notice as soon as I place this, the actual contractor layer populates and it becomes active. All right. Now, for some of you who are curious, Dave, how do I make these layers? How do I assign some of these markups and things like that to these layers? Well, you'll notice in the layer panel here, we can click and hit add new layer, add before, add, add after. So you can do it that way. And let's say I would like to get one for my design symbols here. If I hit add after, I can type in design symbols, and my new layer has been created. Now, if I know that I want to set some of these tools onto that layer, such as this section detail here, I would need to place that on my document, and then I can right click to find layer here and put that right under my design symbols. All right, so now that has the information in it. And again, for any of you wondering, okay, how do we get that to retain that data inside of our tool chest here? As we know, if I grab another section detail, and let's say I turn off design symbols here, only one of them is going to disappear because I've only placed this one on that layer, right? Well, what we would need to do is if you want to utilize the tool chests with your layers, what you can do is, of course, add this tool back to that tool chest. So if I add this back into my tool chest here, that section detail, I'm just going to try to hover over it. Let me change this over to symbol mode. And now it has that layer information embedded into it. Okay. Now, as long as you save that tool chest, you should be able to reuse these layers essentially. And again, kind of going back to what I said about the second floor reference plan here, as you create these comments, it'll bring the layer onto that document. All right. Now, some of you are probably asking, Dave, this is great, but why would we utilize layers for this? Well, one thing that you're going to notice, and I kind of gave it away earlier when I said that these help control the visibility. Well, if I turn off the contractor there, I turn off my design symbols, at that point, I'm only seeing my architectural because I know that the architectural here is active. The grayed out ones obviously do not have any markups on them yet. But the nice thing about this is, at least in my mind, if I'm going to do a design review and I really want to see all of the architectural comments and be able to respond back to those, or at least, set a status or anything like that with them, I can go ahead and turn off some of those other comments to find the information that's just viable for me, right? And typically I know that we can do this through filters, in our markups list, things like that. But this is really just another way to go ahead and organize your comments, your markups, what have you on these documents so that you can control the visibility, but also set them to lock. So if you don't want anyone messing with anything on this layer, we can lock it. And then we can also set it if we want it to print or not. So this is another kind of workflow or thought process here that we're going to change it over to. Let's say that I actually have some personal comments that I really don't want anyone else to see. At that point in time, any comment that I make, no matter the tool that I use, what have you, obviously this one's going to go right onto that contractor layer. But in this case, I could go ahead and place this into my personal comments. And at that point in time, if I know I don't want to print my personal comments, I can turn that off. So when I go to print, all of these other layers and markups would print, but I know this one will not. Okay, so that's another kind of thought process there. Or if, let's say, you do have anyone drafting, and I know I'm not going to get into too much of the CAD versus Bluebeam in this kind of sense, but if we wanted to make some small adjustments, draw some walls in or draw some lines to show specific things and we don't want them to move, this is where we can place them on a layer and lock them. At that point, they would not be able to move anything on that layer, okay? So a couple different workflows to kind of think about there in terms of using layers. Now, another part of where this is going to be really important or really helpful, and that's in terms of utilizing layers, is going to be within Bluebeam Studio. And I know I've put out some content about this before as well, but I definitely think this is an important kind of conversation to have. If you are going to essentially set up to where you're going to push a document with layers on it into a studio session, you will need to set up your layers accordingly. If I can remember my password. There we go. All right. You will need to set up your layers accordingly. So what we're looking at here, if I go into my layers and I have, my different, let's say I have my personal comments turned on, design symbols turned off. Let's say that I'm going to set up a session for my space planning team or for, well, any specific team, whether it's mechanical or specific department or what have you. What we want to do is organize our layers so that we have our, layers active, whatever tools you want utilized to go onto those layers. You want to go ahead and save this configuration. So, oh, here it is right here. Under the settings here, save configuration. And what this is going to do is when we load this into our new session, I'm just going to call this our cold brew session. I'm going to add our open files. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I save that document there before I push that up. And then I'm going to go ahead and say, okay. Now, this again is very important because when this document is loaded into this session, I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel there. When this document is loaded into the session, it cannot be modified in any way in terms of you can't adjust it within the thumbnails. Now we'll see, I don't have that document open yet, so we'll have to wait for this to finish. There we go, finish uploading. But if we get into thumbnails, I'm not going to be able to make any modifications to that drawing. If we get into the layers, notice that it came up with all of the different layers here. Okay, and again, let's say I have my engineer review. As soon as that is placed on there, there it is. Okay, it's automatically going to go to that layer. So again, if you're utilizing tool chests, if you're utilizing layers, it's a way to standardize a lot of your different sessions or your markups, and then your organization and visibility of these markups or tools, what have you. Okay, so let's go ahead and put another spin on this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch over to my quantity takeoff profile here, so we can talk a little bit about actually doing, let's say, a little bit of takeoff with these layers. So if I have my general measurements, I have mechanical, concrete, interior finishes. Let's start with mechanical. So in this case, again, when I come and place my markups here, you're going to notice that as soon as I place it, it brings that layer to life. Okay. Now I have a lot of my different mechanical tools here. I got a dampener, I'm going to go ahead and count these out and place my dampeners in these rooms. Maybe I have some hangers for my ducts, things like that. I can go ahead and place any of these elements on there. Now again, for concrete or what have you, it's just another way to essentially allow us to, well, again, organize and control the visibility of these different markups and elements. Now, I have not calibrated this drawing, so that's why it's kind of giving me a pain there with the 0 cubic yards here. Just getting a little fancy here with adding some control points, making sure I bring that over there. And actually, I might be scaled, but I might not have a depth. No, I have a depth on there. So we're going to add a preset scale, and we're going to go with 1/8 inch equals a foot. There we go. Yeah, okay. All right, so now we have some of our markups on here in terms of takeoff and estimating, right? Again, we can use this, we can take this into a session. If you have a bunch of different people coming in, or at least a few people coming in to do takeoffs on a building, you're going to be able to connect those workflows, and then again, kind of help them keep organized by controlling the visibility or the actual printability, locking, everything like that of these different layers. Now, let's go ahead and put another spin on this, right? Let's go ahead and get into our legends. And in what way do these legends kind of work with our layers? Well, I'm going to go ahead and stay in this one for a second, and we'll start with the kind of mechanical and concrete, and then I'll go back over to the other tools and kind of show you guys how this will work. For anyone new to Revu or new to Legends, you'll notice that you can create a legend by going to your tool chest and then finding the legend tool. Under that, you'll find create new legend. So this is how we can essentially bring this up, and then we'll go ahead and place it on our sheet. Now, this legend is at this point only coming from the mechanical tool set, okay? But what we can do is essentially, let's say if I want to grab my concrete as well and associate it with the same legend. Notice now it populates with my concrete. Same thing with my interior finishes. So I can just go around selecting any of these tool sets that I want to utilize here and essentially kind of just place them to track them with this tool set. So as I go ahead and maybe put in a fuse disconnect switch, or one of my electricians jumps on and places some markups on here, does some takeoffs there for us, we can go ahead and keep track of everything that's happening on this. Now, in what ways do layers work with this? I'm going to go into that one here in a second because I just remembered I better go over the actual properties of a legend, because that is very important to get into. You'll notice in the legend properties, we can change the title here. So let's just say symbol. Actually, we'll go takeoff legend. All right. If we want to separate this based on, let's say, anything in terms of descriptive features, the description, quantity, the unit, if we want to see the subject, if we want to see who authored this, if it has a rise or drop, how deep it goes, if it has a slope, the length, width, area, height, anything like that, we can go ahead and populate these columns into our legend, okay? Now, you can also customize the overall look of your legend here. If you want it to be, let's say, red, or let's say black. And if I want to, instead of outline, I want grid lines. So I can go ahead and place this here, okay? There's a lot of different things, modifications that we can kind of make with these different legends. Now, another cool thing about this is if you want to keep this legend, you can add this into your tool chest as well. So we can set this legend there. Now, another cool thing to notice though is, let's watch this concrete here for a second. I'm going to come over to this layer and I'm going to turn off my concrete, but it still stays, right? It's still there because it's placed on the sheet itself. So one thing that we can do to kind of go through and start, I don't know, cleaning up a lot of our different elements. So let's make sure this one is on that layer, and it is. So if we turn this concrete layer off, we should see it disappear, and there it goes. Now, the legends here, we can actually go ahead and set these to layers as well. So I kind of ruined it a little bit here when I applied all of my different tool sets to a single legend, just because it's tracking everything that's on this sheet, right? But if we wanted to, we could essentially create separate legends. So let's just say I have one for concrete. I'm going to go say this is just going to be for concrete. Oh, didn't go for me. There we go. Okay. So I just have one for concrete. In this case, I could place this right on the concrete layer. And when I turn that off, it turns off and on my legend for the concrete specific. So at this point, if you're looking at, let's say, specific tools, the mechanical takeoffs, or even back here in construction set B, if I'm looking at my contractor, if I'm looking at, an architectural comment, I can go ahead and break these down into individual legends, and then again, control their visibility based on what I'm using with my layers, okay? Now, another thing that I should mention before I kind of push on is that your legends, if you notice in the properties here, it says source pages right here. This is only going off of page 4. If I want this legend to populate on every single sheet throughout my document set, I would hit all pages. Or I'm sorry, not populate. If I want it to pull from all of my different sheets in my set, that's when I'd go ahead and have it. This is what it's pulling this data from. If I want it to apply to every sheet, that's when I'd go ahead and right click on that sheet, and then you hit apply to all pages. So if you right click on that legend, you'll find apply to all pages. And this will go through and apply that legend on whatever sheets have markups from that tool set that's being referenced on that document, okay? So a couple tips and tricks there for that. Now, let me see. I wanted to make sure that, again, notice that when we make any of these comments, our legends will update automatically. Now, going back to another one, if you want to create any type of symbol legends, anything like that, I'm going to go back into my profiles here. And especially just with like my design symbols here, I'm going to make a new legend, symbol legend. That's what we're going to call this one. Okay. In this case, if you are utilizing any specific symbols or if you're taking snapshots from the content of the PDF itself, so if I wanted to say, kind of help specify what that number 4 is right there, I could go ahead and say snapshot. We'll grab that. Well, I don't want to grab off of that one there. It's going to give me that black line on that side. So let's go here. There we go. And then Control V. Oh, snapshot didn't give it to me that time. Huh. All right, let's try a different one here because that one's just not wanting to come over for me. All right, I apologize. I'm having some issues with my snapshot tool this morning for some reason. All right, I'll have to look into that a little bit. But essentially, when we pull from the content itself, let's say anything like a sign, a ballast, or the handicap symbol, anything like that, we can go ahead and essentially, put this into that tool chest under, let's say, design symbols here. And as I utilize this symbol, it's going to populate that symbol legend, right? Now, again, I changed the subject of it. There we go. We can adjust it, based off of what columns are being shown, the actual organization of the columns. You will see that you can create custom columns and utilize them in your legends as well. That is something I'm not going to touch on today, but in the future, if you guys are interested, we can dive into those custom columns in terms of making those for pulling reports on your legends, or being able to calculate some square footages or volumes or what have you. If you guys are trying to create any formulas, we can kind of customize how these legends look, and as well as what information that they are putting out. All right, so we are 30 minutes in at this point. Let me go ahead and see, do we have any questions?
Once again, if you do have questions, go ahead and insert those into the questions pane that should be located on your GoToWebinar control panel. How's that cold brew doing, David?
It's about halfway gone at this point, and it's going good, but I'm feeling like I'm getting a little restless in my chair now.
All right, well, it seems like we do not have any questions at this time.
All right, well, if we don't have any questions, another thing I would say is, with the configurations, I obviously just said save configuration, but you can create a new configuration and kind of save these layers out. So if you are going to get into a design review process and, let's say, a studio session, if you're going to have specific departments involved, you can go ahead and utilize the layers and save that as a configuration. So moving forward, you don't have to go back and forth adjusting what layers are on what configuration. You just save it out, and then you can utilize that configuration when you go into the studio session, right? Another thing I like doing here is I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a kind of preview of this. I've talked about digital dashboards for a while, but one thing I also really like about, let's say, the legends, and I'm going to go ahead and, let's say, I'm going to insert a page. So I'll go back in here, insert blank page, 8.5 by 11. In this case, I could go ahead and find that, let's go back and find that legend here. I'm going to grab my takeoff legend. And you know what? I'm going to grab that concrete legend as well. I'm going to bring both of those here. And then what I can do is change that source page. Let's go down here, change that source page to all pages, change this source page to all pages. And at that point, my legends aren't wanting to work now. I'm not sure why. That's always fun. But essentially, I mean, oh, I'm in the wrong profile. That would be why. Let's go back to my quantity takeoff profile. And as I make new markups on these, what we should see is when we go back to our, I know I'm just kind of making some rudimentary markups here. I just wanted to be able to show this off. When we go back to that first page in our document set, our legends are here and they're updated. So at this point, you really don't even need to have someone dive through the full document set if you can give them this, you know, let's say dashboard or this initial kind of overview of what's going on in the project. Now, we can dive down deep into this really and start talking about planning or progress tracking to see if things are installed. You'll notice that I can grab into these into the legends here, and let's say I want status. So if I pull my status up here, let's say I want to find that architectural ceiling panel, and I know that these have actually been installed, or let's say they're 55%, they're 75%, I can click that and set that status. Now again, I go back to my first page, I know that those are 75% installed. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways that we can utilize these legends and again our layers in terms of organizing what we're seeing on our documents, being able to pull the statuses, the progress tracking, or even just being able to see the quantity of different elements that are being put out onto our PDFs, whether it's comments for design review, it's takeoffs for concrete or MEP, what have you. We're going to be able to populate and kind of aggregate all of that data. All right, for your feedback, thank you all for your interaction with these. It's another reason that we love doing these. We want to be helpful. We want to put out content that is going to be beneficial to all of you, who are joining us for this. So again, thank you for that. But does anyone have any questions before we get out of here?
And I'm just checking those now. So really quickly, we did get a question of, will this recorded training be available for others who were unable to attend? And the answer is yes. So this will be available later on today. And if you go to our website, topconsolutions.com, under the You're Invited tab, there's a subsection that says Webinars on Demand. So you will be able to reference this recorded webinar there, along with our YouTube channel, Topcon Solutions Store. We will have this webinar as well as previously recorded webinars that are already hosted on that channel. I do recommend that everybody check out our Bluebeam tips and tricks playlist. We have a whole playlist that is specific to Bluebeam and has great information there for you. So definitely check out that channel as well. Moving on. So we have some questions here, David. How do you add rows to your legend?
All right, so that is a good question. Adding rows to our legend can usually come from either, and is that the lines itself or the columns? Well, what I can do is actually show both of them. We'll make sure that we kind of cover both bases there. If you want to cover, or I guess if you want to give it the outline look here in terms of the lines across, that is done in the table style within the properties of the legend itself. whether you're looking for the grid lines, horizontal, vertical, those type of things. Now, changing the actual like outline of your actual legend will come from the edit columns. So in this case, if I wanted to add the, let's say the author to it or the date that it was created, let's go back into the area. We'll see volume and let's say sequence. We can turn that on to essentially start expanding what we're seeing in our legend. And there we go. All right, do we have any other questions?
Okay, yes, we do. Thank you for that. Oh, here's another question. When you broke out the concrete legend to assign it to a layer, can that legend be rejoined into the master legend and inherit the layer assignment you made?
That is actually a really good question. I don't think it will. Because if we tried, I mean, I would end up grabbing this one, and then this is how I could. Actually, you know what? No, that's. I wonder. I don't think I can join them together, but that's a good question because essentially, as I go through and create these other legends, and let's say I add the mechanical to the concrete legend, I think the only problem with that would be is that the entire legend disappears because it's on that layer instead of individual elements disappearing from the layer, or yeah, from the legend. So I would say at this point, no, but that is a very good question and is something I think we can kind of dive into and see if we can get it to work.
Okay. If you have any lingering questions or would like to reference this recorded webinar later on today, please check out our YouTube channel as well as our website, topconsolutions.com. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, David, for a great presentation. And I hope that you all have a great rest of your day. And you are on mute, David. Sorry.
That figures. One last thing that I'd like to say before we all leave is that if anyone here is looking to try out Bluebeam Revu, if you're kind of, again, dipping your toes in the water and you want to get a free trial, that web address right there, www.topconsolutions.com/BluebeamRevu. You guys can, go to that web address and download a free 30-day trial for Bluebeam Revu to try some of these things out. So if you've really, you got a bug and you want to get in it and try to see what all you can do with it, feel free to download that. And then, as Diana said, check out our YouTube channel, check out our website. We have a lot of these different videos on there for our tips and tricks, as well as the cold brew and review, different webinars. So again, the content is there for you guys to utilize. And yeah, as Diana said, thank you again. And I look forward to the next cold brew and review with all of you.
Thank you very much, everyone.